This is the photograph that everybody knows now of Lee, which we treasure. It was a birthday party, my daughter's. And Lee sat there with Tracy with a pint, and she got a drink in front of her and celebrating.
Crime and trial, rage on the road, the anatomy of a true-life murder.
My love is so deep. In my thoughts are you I keep. Your eyes are shining. Your voice I hear. The pain is intense to not have you near.
My name is Ian Johnston, Detective Superintendent with West Mercia Constabulary.
I'm Brian Russell, I'm Detective Inspector based here at Redditch.
My name is Rod Chater, Midlands Correspondent for the Daily Mirror.
Days to Christmas unless we're counting Sundays. Well, why wouldn't we count Sundays? I suppose shops are all open. And if that thought sends a chill through your veins, let's try and warm you up with possibly the tappiest foot tapper of 1996 here at Cornwall.
We'd been drinking and we decided to go home a bit early. We drove the usual route onto the roundabout, and that's when I didn't see exactly what happened because I was changing a tape. I was leaning forward like this to change the tape. Lee kind of reacted to something someone he thought was cutting him up. Then we went down the main road to our turn-off. That's when I noticed the other car, this Sierra, kind of looming up on us behind and flashing its lights, kept like tailgating, like it meant to overtake, then dropping back. And that's when Lee started to get wound up and started driving wildly. It was frightening, it was really frightening.
This is where Tracy said that the hunt was getting ever more frantic, the chase, the pursuit was getting ever more intimidatory, and at this point, at the very top here, with Fox Hill Lane coming in from the right, and here we are going down Cooper's Hill, and just at this point, the Ford Sierra pursuing forced Lee Harvey over onto the left-hand side, got in front of him, and here, just where we are coming now to this bit of grass verge, this is Keeper's Cottage. And here, precisely here, outside Keeper's Cottage, said Tracy Andrews, the Sierra having got in front, braked sharply, forced Lee to a halt here.
Lee got out the car and the other driver got out, and they were shouting at one another, poking one another like this with their fingers. The driver went back to the car and then the passenger got out. I heard him call Lee a packy bastard, and then he hit Lee. Oh, I don't know how many times, more than once. Then Lee fell on the floor and I got out the car. The man was leaning over Lee and I told him to F off, and he said, "You F off, you little slut," and he punched me really hard in the face. I remember falling and tripping over Lee, but I put my hands out, and as I fell, I hit my head. I hit my head on the road, and all I can remember about him was he was a porky man with staring eyes.
Stay here.
Please, help
I'll call an ambulance. I won't be a minute. I'll be right back.
Oh, God, please, help me.
I've been working along with my Detective Sergeant, Mick O'Donnell. I'd gone home. In fact, I think I was in bed. Got a telephone call from Mick O'Donnell to say there's been a serious incident in the lanes out at Alf Church. We believe a male's been stabbed to death. The witness, his girlfriend, will be taken to Redditch Police Station shortly from the Alexandra Hospital. I'd like you to be in at Redditch to meet her and see what she's got to say.
At the time I arrived, Lee Harvey was deceased. He'd been pronounced deceased. He was still towards the middle of the road by the side of his motor car. I knew that his girlfriend, Tracy Andrews, was in a house nearby, Keeper's Cottage, from where she'd received some assistance earlier on in the evening. And I think shortly after I arrived, she was taken away to the Alexandra Hospital by ambulance.
She was shown by the uniformed police officers that had been at the hospital with her. She was shown into an interview room upstairs, and she was with her father. She looked a little bit sort of dishevelled. She had some markings around her face. She looked like she'd been crying, and she looked a bit sort of dazed. So what she told me was basically the story that she was going to tell and stick to, and that was the only real time we got that account from her. So I was glad that I did it at the time that I did it, sort of thing.
All we had was Tracy, and I had to ask myself first and foremost, is what she says feasible? It's feasible, and it's possible, and from that it was a question of, well, let's go along the steps that we know we've got to take.
Tracy Andrews maintains that she and Lee Harvey were pursued along these lanes by a dark-coloured Ford Sierra, just possibly an F-Reg, but no registration number, not even really a colour. Obviously we're looking for people who were driving these roads on the night of the murder. Did they see anything? No word for those will be detailing for this test.
Having people nominated who would like the suspect, like the driver, or like the suspect with a car, without a car. Quite a lot of categories. So we spent quite a lot of time working out the permutations of that.
However, we've had a good think about it, and we reckon we can do it with 8 roadblocks. The locations of which you can see here, here.
It seemed to us as the investigation team that the main drive should initially be through the media. So therefore we called a press conference at a very early stage. Make no bones about it, for impact obviously, if I appear, it makes some impact. If Tracy Andrews appears, it makes a greater impact, and there's more likelihood that people might say, I remember seeing her, I remember this, that and the other. So therefore she agreed to come on to the press conference. Maureen and Ray, who were in support of him, clearly wanted to do all that they could, readily agreed to come onto the press conference.
It was a massive media turnout, all crammed into the upper room, the briefing room at Redditch Police Station, and it was quite clear at that point that the police still believed Tracy's story, because at that point they had no reason not to.
On that first morning when we were going to do the press conference, I walked in a little naively, I think, thinking that we'd have local radio, local press, and there was just a barrage.
And indeed, a police press officer came into the room prior to the briefing starting and said, lads, she's been through a terrible ordeal. This is not going to be a bum fight. We need to treat her properly and not make her ordeal any worse.
They saw something in her, the blonde victim or femme fatale or whatever, you know, she did capture it, and everyone else, I think, became a bit player.
Both Lee and the other person were like playing cat and mouse with each other for a while. I got out the car because I'm not...
We was asked to sit on the press conference because Tracy, at first, she didn't want to do it, and Ian asked me if I'd sit in with her, and I said yes, that I would, because I just wanted to bring the truth and I wanted the facts.
Then I went over to the man. We had a confrontation and he hit me. I can't remember, I fell to the floor. I can't remember if I was knocked out for a bit or what, I don't know. It was just the way he looked. His eyes was, he had starey eyes.
When she was talking about the porky man with staring, piercing eyes, there was that moment, that flash of anger. It was an electric, dramatic moment, and everybody in the room became aware that this woman who was claiming that hours earlier she'd been the victim of road rage was herself capable of rage.
It was just the way he looked. His eyes was... He had stereo eyes.
Obviously, I just wish that it was her telling the truth, and there was this thin man and this fat man, and that they'd done it.
We had to go through the process of driving to the route and recording that route, start off at the pub where they'd been on the evening and then drive the route, turn left here, this is where the car first got behind us, this is where, you know, Lee said, oh, who's he think he is, sort of Nigel Mansell or whatever.
Keep going, I'll show you. Here.
Sure?
Yeah. Now they're definitely behind us, flashing their lights and everything like I told you.
Very narrow.
Yeah, well, like I said, they couldn't get past.
At the junction?
Right here.
This way?
Yeah.
What's happening now?
They're kind of getting really close, like almost shunting us. And then it's here. This is where they go past and get in front of us and stop. Here. Exactly here.
When I did start to have sort of massive warning bells was, she was staying with her family. I went to the family house. I'd said to Tracy, there are some questions I really need you to answer. The investigation team need to know, and only you've got the answers.
Do you want to sit down a minute?
Why?
So I can talk to you about tomorrow.
It's okay. I'll stand up.
No, Tracy, it's only that I wanted to say to you to get a good night's sleep tonight because...
What?
Well, might be a bit of a tough day tomorrow. We need to get down to a lot of detail.
But I told you everything.
Yeah, I know. But what you think is everything might not be our kind of everything. You might have forgotten things, overlooked a few things.
No, I didn't.
Things can slip out your mind in a traumatic situation like that. So I need... The investigation needs some very detailed answers.
Well, I don't want to. I'm an innocent person and I'm being treated like a criminal. I've had enough of this.
No, well, that's what I'm saying. Get a good rest tonight. If you're fresh tomorrow, it won't be such hard going for you. All right?
No, it's not all right.
I know. But we still have to do this.
Went out there the next day and her family said, oh, you know, she's in the lounge and she's not really speaking to her sort of thing. She's been back across to her flat and I've found some empty tablet cartons in the bin, her mum says. I thought, oh dear, you know, where is she? I need to speak to her. She's basically unconscious, you know, she can't sort of speak. I'm trying to rouse her. Basically just said, call an ambulance.
Super.
Ryan?
Bloody hell.
You alright?
Oh, I'm in the casualty in the Alex. Tracy. Went to her mother's place. She's out bloody cold. Only just about breathing. Looks like she might have done a truckload of tablets.
How bad is she?
Critical but stable. I never know what that's supposed to mean. She wrote a couple of notes. One to her mother, one to her kid. Sort of, my heart is broken, I can't go on living without Lee sort of stuff. And I suppose that moves things in the direction you were thinking.
She's still unconscious?
No, but they won't let me see her yet.
You better hang on there, Brian.
I have to say, I think it was a serious attempt to end her life. It could be indicative that, yes, you know, I've done something that I can't live with, or I've really lost someone and I can't live without. So it was strange that that happened in the morning and she was found by Brian Russell at the lunchtime. And it was that evening that Simon Baker and Elaine Carruthers came forward.
The critical evidence, which came in actually pretty shortly from Baker and Carruthers, saying that they had seen Lee Harvey, unquestionably Lee Harvey. It's a very rare car, and besides all the timings worked, the route worked. It was Lee Harvey and Tracy. They saw them having this enormous row minutes, almost seconds before the murder, and there was no pursuing Sierra on the route, the only sensible route, really, that Tracy and Lee could have come down. That really destroyed Tracy's story. It was the evidence that she could not gainsay, though she tried very hard.
Mr. Merivale.
Inspector, you want to look at it?
Please.
Very young, wasn't he?
Last time I saw him, there was blood everywhere. Didn't realise the facial wounds were so deep. Hell of a fury that must have been. How many wounds?
Into the 30s, mostly to the neck, to the face, some in the back. Take it you haven't found a weapon.
Well, fragments of something, Swiss Army knife, we think it could be. Would that do it?
Yes, it would. I'm sure it would.
30-odd wounds, you say? That'd take a bit of time, wouldn't it?
She was formally released on the Friday night, as far as the hospital were concerned. So we were there early on the Saturday morning.
Tracy Andrews, I'm arresting you on suspicion of the murder of Lee Harvey.
Rubbish!
You do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you do not mention.
Why did you try to kill yourself?
Tracy, that's a grossly improper question, and you're not obliged to answer it.
You did it because you were consumed with guilt.
What am I supposed to be guilty about? I've just got to sit here, helpless, with you saying this stuff. If I'd done it like you say, why would I try and kill myself? My whole life is gone. I just want to be with him. Nobody else. I know we had a stormy relationship. I know we had ups and downs, but stop trying to make it sound like we were always fighting. We weren't. We were in love.
You and Lee had a row. It went over the top. You must have said to yourself, my God, what have I done? A frenzied attack. And it was your frenzy, Tracy.
No.
This one was his last Christmas with his daughter Danielle, trimming the tree up. They trimmed that tree up. That was the last Christmas that they'd ever do it. She was 4 there. But his eyes and his hair, got beautiful thick hair, beautiful hair. He was slim, very slim, kept fit. He loved all sorts of sports and absolutely loved it. Fantastic golfer. Just a wonderful dad and fantastic son. We just miss him so much.
My name's David Krigman. I was leading counsel in the prosecution of Tracy Andrews.
I'm Joanna Bale. I was a reporter on the Times at the time of the murder and the court case.
The whole presentation of her case pre-trial and during the trial was of indignation and anger that she should be the one who had found herself in the dock.
The public gallery was packed, the press gallery was packed, TV, cameras everywhere outside, and reporters all over the place. Big media circus, basically.
She created a very, very plausible story, and the expectation presented by the defence was that they should win.
I thought we had a 50-50 going into the trial.
Everybody thought she was guilty. Conviction was by no means certain.
When you're putting something in front of a jury, it can always go either way.
And it was all to hinge on cross-examination at Crown Court.
I'd like us to go through this whole business in detail, Miss Andrews. It's the details I find confusing. I imagine you might find them a little bit confusing yourself, looking back.
No, I don't actually. It's all very clear to me.
Then why is it that you say you can't remember which route you took from the Marlborough pub that evening?
No, I can't. I remember we came through the lanes, but there's various ways you can go.
She was quite composed throughout the whole trial. She was very composed. She was very smartly dressed. I think she wore a pinstripe suit on her first day.
Well, yeah, I was confused.
Well, can you tell the court now, then, if you and Lee Harvey...
She set the story and she stuck with the story. She didn't buckle under cross-examination. You know, she was given a fairly searching cross-examination by Mr. Krigman.
It's all just a blur.
It's a blur.
Well, yeah, it's just like a dream.
Yes, I'm not surprised it's like a dream. It's like a dream, isn't it? Because that's actually what it is. A fantasy.
No, it's not.
There were moments that things that she couldn't explain, but it didn't cause her to sort of abandon her story, you know.
Well, at the very beginning, before we got to court, the prosecution had a number of problems. The defence here, prior to trial, the defendant herself and her solicitor, had projected this enormous public relations exercise with great impact.
This was a very proactive defence. You know, they went for the story and they went for the police.
Tim Robinson took the extraordinary position of asking for reporting restrictions to be lifted. Extremely controversial.
They held their own press conference. I mean, that's virtually unheard of for a defence team to hire a hotel.
You may think it's unprecedented. It is unprecedented. Why have I called a press conference? Frankly, because I'm appalled at the outrageous way the police have conducted this inquiry.
The defence view was, well, the police have got this horribly wrong.
My client is an innocent woman who was witness to, and actually a victim, let's not forget that, a victim of a most horrendous crime. And now she finds herself under suspicion from the police and, I'm sorry people, but thanks to you lot, the media, from the public too.
Can I ask you, Mr. Robinson?
Yes, you can in a minute when I've finished, if I may.
Tim Robinson himself, a controversial figure, he was at that time himself, bizarrely, under investigation by police for a huge legal aid fraud that was ultimately to lead to him being sentenced to 7 years in prison and ordered to pay compensation of costs in excess of £1 million.
I'd like to ask you to take a look at this e-fit. Now, this is the face of the attacker the police should be hunting down.
They had a witness who could say there had been a similar incident with a motorist with a knife, and they had this on the face of it, rather demure, small woman facing a charge of extreme brutality. So they had quite a lot going for them in those respects.
My client remembers, and you can see this, that he was wearing a donkey jacket and this woolly, you could say, skull cap. And she remembers his rotund, fleshy features. In particular, she remembers and will never forget his bulging, staring eyes.
We ended up traipsing all around the Midlands trying to find people with dark-coloured Sierras who fit the description of, you know, and when you looked at it, it was just me. The photo fit she came up with was me as I sat across the table from her on that first night taking her statement, you know. She talked about him being in a donkey jacket. I was wearing a donkey jacket. I've got short hair, you know. She talked about him being round-faced and, well, you know, look at me, I'm round-faced. Starey eyes, well, you know. And it was just my picture on the photo fit, you know, and we were supposedly having to go around the Midlands trying to find people who fit that description.
Miss Andrews, I'd like us to look together at the timings. Can we do that?
How do you mean?
I mean that when we look at the time that you left the Marlborough pub, it's been calculated that you must have been at the scene of the murder for at least 17 minutes before Mr. Main, on leaving Keeper's Cottage, found you on the road.
Maybe, I don't know. I wasn't looking at my watch.
No, I'm sure you weren't.
Her account, when analysed in detail, did not fit the scientific evidence at the scene. The location of blood, the type of blood, the arterial spraying of the blood, and on that the prosecution case was seemingly sound and compelling.
You returned to the lane outside the house. How long after the call to the emergency services?
Oh, half a minute at most. I left Mrs. Dunn.
There was evidence that she was covered from the top of her head down over her face with dripping blood when she was first seen.
Yes, cradling him, sitting close to him.
No.
So, what? Wanting to rush off to the house to get help?
No, she wasn't. Not at all. She was, well, just standing by her car with her back to it. She was covered in blood. I asked her if there'd been an accident. She said no.
Bloodstains on the top of her clothing did fall in line with what she'd said, and on the tops of her legs of her trousers, that she had nursed him at some stage, and obviously he bled quite heavily onto her. But also there were splashes of blood that indicated that she'd been close to Lee Harvey as he stood, basically spurting blood from the wounds, particularly to his neck.
She had got covered in blood while it happened, and after it happened, and significantly after it had happened, because by holding his body that was bleeding, she covered herself in blood, which she may well have realised had the capacity to obscure the real reading and analysis of what type of spraying blood it was, how it was distributed and so on.
She was in such a state, sobbing, and she kept saying she didn't know anything. She couldn't remember anything.
At post-mortem, a number of long blonde hairs had been taken from the fingers of his one hand. They corresponded in every detail with hair from Tracy. She had covered him with her leather jacket as he lay at the scene, and encrusted in blood on the sleeve of her jacket was a big clump of blonde hair that again corresponded in every detail with her hair.
Each witness had a really compelling piece of evidence to present to the court. For instance, videotaped evidence from a 9-year-old girl who was in a house nearby, near the murder scene, and was woken up by the sound of two people arguing outside her bedroom window.
You comfortable?
Yes.
Your teddy comfortable?
Yes.
Good. Can you understand why you're here?
So you got this videotaped evidence of this little girl clutching a teddy bear in her Navy school uniform.
And what I want is for you just to tell me what you heard.
When I woke up?
Yes. What did you hear when you woke up?
Outside, there were people talking.
How many people?
2 it sounded like. Definitely a man, because he was shouting, you know, really arguing. The man sounded fierce, like he was trying to be really fierce to the other person.
And this other person, was it a man or a woman?
It was a soft voice.
But you couldn't
She
say
didn't hear 4 voices, which is what she would have heard had Tracy Andrews' story been correct. She only heard the 2 voices. So that was quite a compelling piece of evidence, and quite a dramatic piece of evidence, because you don't often get children giving evidence in murder trials.
We are now approaching the crucial junction with Wheelie Road.
Will you give the court your name, please?
Simon Baker.
You are an accountant, Mr. Baker, is that right?
That's correct.
And on Saturday the 30th of November last year, at around 10:15 p.m., you and a colleague were driving westwards from...
And they were, in fact, doing exactly the route that Tracy and Lee were doing, but they were doing it in reverse. So they were coming from Alvechurch.
About half a mile on from there was where we saw the car in the side road. It was reversing fast. I could see it over my shoulder, hurtling back towards the lane.
What did it do after that?
I couldn't see. We'd turned a corner before it got to the road.
And you drove on?
Yes. We just carried on along the lane.
Along Wheelie Road?
Yes.
Did you see the car clearly?
I did, yes.
Could you describe it?
Definitely. It was a white Ford Escort RS 2000.
Did you see any cars coming past you from the opposite direction?
No.
You're certain of that?
Yes, I am. I'm certain. It was at Studebaker's nightclub in Broad Street. The music's loud, you know what it's like, so you can't hear a lot, but you could tell they was arguing.
They painted a picture of this very young couple who were both insanely jealous people.
She leans over and bites him on the neck, quite viciously.
There was this ring of flaming red tooth marks, like when you bite an apple.
She was cast as the demon from hell because of all her previous attacks on Lee.
She thumped him twice in the face.
He never retaliated.
Then she orders him, go and get me a Malibu and pineapple, go on. And he does.
She did look so brazen. She was the sort of bleached, blonde, brassy, tarty girl who'd had quite a tough life and gave as good as she got, basically.
Perhaps the biggest problem of all that the prosecution had was the absence of the murder weapon.
They brought out Tracy Andrews' high-heeled black snakeskin boot, and inside there was the imprint of the knife, and it was a very clear imprint of a knife. There was a pointed bit at the end with a curve going up. It was quite obviously where she'd stuck the knife down her boot.
Am I correct in saying that you were the duty sister at the Alexandra Hospital in Redditch on the night when the defendant...
There was a very efficient sister from the hospital.
I was, yes.
Can you describe the defendant as she looked that night?
Her hair was, you know, tangled. There was blood in it.
How did the defendant seem to you?
How do you mean?
Did she seem unhappy?
Yes, unhappy.
Where were you treating the defendant?
In a side room off the main ward.
And did she leave the room on any occasion?
And the effect of her evidence was that the defendant was repeatedly going off to the bathroom for unnaturally long periods of time.
And went and knocked on the toilet door and asked if she was all right.
Did she reply?
And it was the prosecution case that somehow during those absences she was disposing of the knife.
She managed to keep it together enough to get rid of the weapon, the murder weapon. They think she got rid of it in a hospital waste bin while she was in the loo. So I thought then that it's not really a straightforward crime of passion. She was quite cold and calculating.
It was only by going through every single detail of this otherwise seemingly plausible account, piece by piece, detail by detail, would the real truth be exposed.
Well, it wasn't until the light came on that I could shout for help.
His cross-examination went on for 3 days. It was extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. He just took her story apart.
Well, I don't know. I don't remember.
You don't remember?
Until she was left standing there with no further protection, just amidst the ruins of what had been her story. And she was reduced to saying, I don't know. I can't remember.
I don't know.
She was left with nothing left to say, but still he kept on, and still he kept on, and still he kept on. He just totally destroyed her.
Perhaps he was, I don't know. It's like a dream.
You are a woman of considerable deceit, Miss Andrews, are you not?
No, I'm not.
I think you must have been shocked to find out the extent of your vicious temper.
I have not got a vicious temper.
There's always going to be an element of doubt throughout the trial. You know, it seems when it's the prosecution case, gosh, this is really strong. There is no chance of her walking away from this. Then the defence start doing their work and you think, the jury are going to believe this. They're actually going to believe this. They're going to be so full of doubt they're not going to be able to convict.
Miss Andrews, despite the deceptive smokescreen thrown up by the police and prosecution, would you say you were a monster with a motive for murder?
No.
Maureen Ray and Michelle Harvey were all there and they were in the same seats. They had reserved seats in the public gallery every day.
You had a motive for marriage?
Yes. I loved him. I said that and... Excuse me, I won't have that. I will not have people making remarks. I will not have that going on.
What remarks, Miss Andrews?
Her behind me, Lee's mother, and his father.
Tracy Andrews was in the witness box giving evidence and she just stopped and said, I'm not having that. And she'd apparently heard them making comments or mouthing something to her. Nobody else heard it. Well, Ronald Thwaites didn't hear it. I didn't hear it.
Can we continue, Mr. Thwaites?
For Mr. Krigman, QC, it's professional reputation, isn't it? For Mr. Thwaites, QC, again, it's professional reputation. Bear in mind what the family are going through, and we're with them every day. What are they going through? You know, a lot of pressure on that family, sitting in court.
Ronald Thwaites was quite good at the sort of typical barrister's dramatic flourishes, and at one point he actually got her to step outside the witness box and go up to the jury and show the jury her hands.
One of the striking features of this case is that such a small and seemingly demure woman could be capable of such brutal violence.
She went along showing each jury member her hands and looking at each of them in the eyes.
It's rare for a woman to kill. For a woman to kill with this ferocity is most unusual.
To give an impression in their mind that actually this woman could not have wielded a knife that stabbed a man 30 times.
And she paraded up and down in front of the jury box, and yes, it had its moment of drama.
And I don't think I ever saw any tears from her or any... I don't think her composure ever cracked, even under cross-examination. I think most people would have just given up, you know, not gone through that trauma of standing up in court in front of Lee Harvey's family and telling lies, telling more lies and more lies and more lies in the vain hope that, you know, she might get away with it.
Miss Andrews, did you kill Lee Harvey?
No, I did not.
Did you want him dead?
No, I did not.
From the moment your relationship began up to the day he died, did you want any other man?
No, never.
Were you faithful or unfaithful to him?
I was faithful. I loved Lee more than anything in the world, and I didn't want to live without him. I want to come back here one day to this court and sit out there and see the person who did this.
The jury went out on the Monday, and this case was a one-off in so many ways. Ronnie Thwaites, QC, applied for Tracy Andrews to be given overnight bail while the jury was out. Now, it never happens. It absolutely never happens. Judges feel that someone who knows that they are only hours away from a jury's verdict may abscond. Someone who knows that position to be the case may harm themselves, may commit suicide, and Tracy Andrews had already, apparently, tried to commit suicide. So to everybody's jaw-dropped astonishment, Mr. Justice Buckley agreed to overnight bail, and Tracy Andrews walked out of Birmingham Crown Court on that Friday afternoon for one last night of freedom. I called round at the house that night here in Alvechurch and spoke to Alan Carter on the doorstep, and we discussed the theoretical possibility of me having an exclusive interview with Tracy. He said, well, not at the moment, as you can hear, there's, you know, the family are here, and indeed one could hear the sounds of a social gathering in the back garden. It was Tracy's last party, the condemned woman's last supper, as it were. So I just left and said, okay, well, I'll see you at court tomorrow, and sure enough, the jury were back in to start their deliberations at about 10:30, and sometime after that, I got a message to say, okay, Tracy, we'll see you now. And there I found myself face to face with this woman who was about to become one of the most celebrated convicted murderesses in, I suppose, in British criminal history.
My love is so deep. In my thoughts of you I keep. Your eyes are shining. Your voice I hear. The pain is intense to not have you near.
I sat next to her. She was there in black sort of frock, creamish summer jacket, and she just talked about what was in front of her. She said she knew she was about to be found guilty. She had no illusions about that.